Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we discuss the age-old topic, is Pokemon card opening a form of gambling? Now, today's video is inspired by the article that you're seeing on screen, which we'll delve into a little bit later, but as a little bit of context as to why this is such an important topic, gambling in all of its forms has become, in many jurisdictions and federal government locations, a regulated activity, meaning the government, whether it be at the state, local, or municipal level, or even at the federal level, is something that is regulated by the government and has certain rules and laws placed around it. As a result, if Pokemon card openings were to fall into that particular type of activity, meaning Pokemon cards are deemed a form of gambling in the same way that lottery tickets are, for example, there could be a lot of government rules and regulations then placed onto the hobby. For example, you need to be 18 years or older in some locations to purchase a lottery ticket. And the same could potentially happen to Pokemon if it is deemed a gambling activity. Now, all of that said, I will admit that that is a bit of a dystopian future that I don't think is going to happen, meaning it's very, very unlikely that Pokemon could ever legitimately, legally fall into this particular area of gambling and become a regulated activity. However, all that said, in today's video, we're going to take a real deep dive into what it really means for something to be gambling, as well as how Pokemon cards could potentially fit that, and more importantly, how they could potentially fall out of the scope of what is gambling by definition. Now, as I'd mentioned, today's video is inspired by this particular article, which came out a few weeks ago, and I wanted to give a little bit of time for my own thoughts and opinions to form and develop on this. But in the article, which I'll leave a link to down below, Sodapoppin, a pretty popular Twitch streamer, basically goes out on a limb and says, hey, for all those folks on Twitch that are opening up Pokemon cards right now, it is kid-friendly gambling. Now, obviously, he was recently criticized, but it's ironic because he also has been criticized in the past for promoting a variety of gambling type activities, including most famously blackjack. So he went ahead and played blackjack on stream and then was criticized because he was promoting gambling to kids. Now, on the flip end, once recently the whole trend of opening Pokemon cards spread into the Twitch community, Sodapoppin then came out and said, you know, I got criticized in the past for this, and now magically I'm going to criticize the folks who called me out because, you know, there's also this whole argument that if I was promoting gambling to kids, how is this any different? So, Sodapoppin raises a very interesting point, and the article goes to kind of quote some various folks. So, you know, it says that it is a divisive issue, which in fact it is, and it can affect teenagers and adults too. It's not only relegated to kids anymore, right? Now, here's the funny part, is that this article goes on to actually quote some pretty interesting individuals, including this one folk on a Reddit thread who says that he spent about $2,000 to $2,000 on cards, and he's made about 20% of that in return. Effectively, I think what that means is he probably opened about $2,000 in modern product, and then magically he has about $400 in cards right then and there. That is an interesting statement. I definitely think it is very realistic. I have seen tons of situations like that play out. They are kind of missing the point because I think these types of people expect to open boxes and make money, which is a very rare phenomenon, although it does happen. And they're kind of overlooking the fact that this is a hobby where people will pay for those cards, not with the intent of making an immediate profit, but more so with the intent of doing many other things like collecting the cards or trading the cards. And some of that cost of that $2,000 might be built into that 20% return. So even though residually you only have about $400 in cards left, the other $1,600, one could argue, have been spent on the experience of going about collecting these cards, opening the packs, and really, basically you're paying $1,600 for the experience of opening the packs and the possibility of pulling something a little bit better. So, the article, all things considered, is pretty much on par. Nothing here is purposefully misleading or vague. It is what it is. Sodapoppin said what he said, and he's launched a pretty legitimate allegation. Is Pokemon card collecting gambling? Or rather, is Pokemon card opening gambling? Now, in order to take a look at that and really kind of get a good idea, I went ahead and turned to the free encyclopedia, Wikipedia, to get a better understanding of what gambling is. And Wikipedia says it pretty well. Gambling, also known as betting, is a wagering of money or something of value, often referred to as stakes, on an event with an uncertain outcome. And the primary intent of this is to win money or material goods. Basically, you go into an uncertain situation, you put some money in, and the hope is that there is a potential for you to walk away with more than you went into. Gambling thus requires 3 elements to be present: consideration, or an amount wagered, risk, a chance, and a prize. So, could Pokemon fall into this particular definition? Yes and no. Here is the key pivotal item that we need to be mindful of. Is there really a risk involved in Pokemon card openings? Now, in order to understand this better, I want to actually go back to the whole Sodapoppin article, where this particular individual on Reddit says that I got a buddy who spent about $2,000 on cards so far and has made a 20% return. Now, individuals like that will typically be opening packs with the intention of pulling chase cards. Basically, in any given set, there is a particular Pokemon card that everyone is after. If you pull that card, you're in the money. If you don't pull that card, you're probably out of the money. And there is this idea of risk involved with that. But here is something that no one stops to consider in the scheme of Pokemon cards. For every single pack, you are guaranteed a rare card. So, the definition of whether or not Pokemon card openings are gambling depends on your definition, or your subjective definition, of what a hit is. Because again, in every single pack of Pokemon cards, you are guaranteed 9, 10, or 11 cards depending on the era of Pokemon you're pulling from. Which means you are objectively paying approximately anywhere from 39 to 41 cents per card, and that is what that is, period, end of story. So in this particular definition, where you accept the fact that there are 9 to 11 cards in a pack, and you will be opening that, then it's not gambling. There is no risk present, and that is what puts out the definition of gambling and causes Pokemon to fall outside of the definition of gambling. There is a consideration. You are paying $4, and there is a prize, because technically, even though there are rare cards guaranteed in your pack, there are multiple rare cards in a set, so there is a risk or a chance that you're not going to get the one that you want. But that's the key part of the definition. It's the card that you want versus an objective chance where there is something that could or could not happen. Think of it a different way. When you gamble, in a more traditional sense of the word, you buy a lottery ticket. You put a $1 into a larger pot of money, and one or several winners will walk away with that money. Here's the problem. If you lose, you definitively and objectively lose. You don't get your dollar back, ever. Here's the funny part, though. The awkward chance of not walking away with anything isn't present in Pokemon. Therefore, there is no risk and there is no chance involved. Because, from a technical perspective, once you open your pack, even if you're disappointed with your pull, you do still have 9, 10, or 11 Pokemon cards left. Whether or not you like them isn't a question for gambling, and just because you don't like those Pokemon cards doesn't mean it's gambling. Rather, it just means you're unhappy with your pulls, and therefore, Pokemon card openings are not gambling. Now, personally, this is where I fall when I think about my opinion on this topic. Again, a lot of people infuse their own subjective wants and needs into Pokemon card openings, and you can really see that in the way that this statement was made. he opened $2,000 on cards so far and has made 20% of that in return. Again, these people were probably looking for big hits, and then when they didn't get big hits, they were upset. And so it's very easy to then quantify that as 20% of that in return, approximately $400. For most of us, I think the fair majority of us will agree that we open packs not necessarily primarily with the intention of making a profit, but rather just for the fun of opening up packs. And again, as I mentioned in this video, that is part of the experience that you are paying for. Pokemon wraps those cards up in little plastic wrappers knowing that you're going to go ahead and open them. And that's the whole point. You're paying for that experience. And just because you don't get what you want doesn't mean it's gambling. Now, all that said, the other argument to be made here is that yes, it is. Now watch how I'm going to step through someone who's not thinking about this objectively would go ahead and define Pokemon cards openings as gambling. Is there a consideration? Yes, I paid anywhere from $4 to an ultra modern set to $15,000, $20,000 on a first edition base set pack. So that is the amount I have wagered. Is there a prize? Yes. Prize, for the sake of this argument, is going to be defined as a ultra rare card or better. So I'm talking about the first edition base set holos. I'm talking about the EX cards and the Gold Star cards. I'm talking about legend cards from Generation 4, etc., etc. I'm looking for full art, texture, rainbow rares, holographic. Give me that shiny cardboard. That is the prize. And the risk? Well, yes, there is a risk if you think only about the ultra rares, because the whole argument then would be, well, the risk is that I'm going to pull a regular non-holographic card. But as we previously mentioned, that isn't the correct way to be thinking about gambling and the way that Pokemon falls into it, because at the end of the day, the only reason that you think it's gambling is because you haven't pulled the card you want to pull. Instead, you're not looking at the fact that objectively, this is a situation where you opened a pack of cards, you didn't get what you want, but you still have 9, 10, or 11 cards on the table in front of you that you just opened up. You paid for those, and even though there isn't a card that's worth more on the secondary or tertiary markets, doesn't necessarily mean that you just gambled in the traditional sense of the word. Now, with all that said, friends, you now know where I stand on the topic. I personally don't think it's gambling because I think that when we open up packs of cards, we're guaranteed a rare. Whether or not we like that rare is a different story and is purely subjective, but at the end of the day, it's not gambling in a legal sense of the term. And I suppose that's what today's video really set to prove, is that from a legal or government or compliance perspective, Pokemon card openings are not gambling, because realistically, there is residual value in each of the cards that you have, and just because you made an investment in these cards and it didn't work out for you, again, does not mean that it is gambling. It just means you made a poor investment, or you should have kept a pack sealed and let it retain its value rather than open it up and get a non-holographic rare in it. But all that said, I will also go ahead and say that Pokemon cards can really turn into a form of gambling in and of themselves. Not necessarily because there is a, particular area that's really good or really bad about Pokemon cards and you can kind of game the system by doing the better parts than the worst parts, but rather because people can spend a lot of money on Pokemon cards not realizing how much they're spending, and then they can end up really doing damage to themselves financially as well as in all other aspects of their life, because obviously, much like any other vice, they can spend too much money, get in over their heads, take out inappropriate loans, buy things they can't afford, etc., etc. So I will say that while Pokemon card openings aren't necessarily legally defined as gambling, they do bear a lot of the negative qualities that gambling and other similar wagering or betting type of lifestyles could lead you to. So do bear that in mind, that although legally it shouldn't be defined as gambling based on the argument that I'm making here today about the fact that rare cards are guaranteed and just because you didn't get what you want doesn't mean it's gambling, there is still the same amount of risk when it comes to spending inappropriate amounts of money, getting addicted, or, getting some sort of weird type of situation playing out in your life where you can no longer afford, or you're starting to spin out of control because of the costs associated with Pokemon cards. So do bear that in mind, that, you know, even though there's no legal reason to call it gambling, it can still be a very dangerous vice in the same way that gambling is. I don't think Sodapoppin was trying to make that point, but it is something worth mentioning that, you know, some people do end up in really awkward situations financially because they spent a little too much on Pokemon. And that can range all the way from, oh, haha, I can't get Starbucks this week, all the way up to, hey, I can't afford a rent, or I can't afford some really important expense in my life because of the damage I've done to myself financially with Pokemon. So do bear that in mind, and always, of course, buy and sell within your means to make sure that you're always able to put food on the table and afford what you need first. And then this is a hobby. This is something you should enjoy doing, not something that you should rely on as a form of revenue generation or something of that nature. Now, with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out today's video. As always, feel free to leave a like. And for this video particularly, I definitely encourage folks to engage with me below down in the comments. There's tons of different arguments to be made one way or the other, and of course with all TCG videos, this is one of those things that's very much based on my opinion, so definitely feel free to leave your opinion down below, and let's engage in some discourse about what could or could potentially make Pokemon a gambling activity in the future. Now, with all that said, friends, of course, if you liked today's video, feel free to leave a like, but also a subscription on the channel definitely helps, and I always appreciate it. There are tons of places you could be, and you chose to spend a couple minutes with me watching this video and trying to put your head around this topic, which is awesome, and as always, I appreciate your viewership. Other than that, friends, thanks again for checking out today's video. Leave a comment, leave a like, blah, 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 and I'll talk to you guys real soon. Peace.